14. The gang had just found themselves in the city of Ba Sing Se with urgent news of a plan to defeat the Fire Lord. All they need to do is get this information to the Earth King. However, upon arrival, they're met with some serious red tape. That is, government obstacles standing between them and a meeting with the king. We're introduced to a character by the name of Ju Di, who acts as the group's caretaker, but on the low mostly serves as a babysitter, making sure that the group never gets too close to their goal. Through a series of events, the gang finds themselves just short of meeting the king, and instead all get dragged into a room to have a meeting with Long Fang. This is where we learn the true secret behind Ba Sing Se's success. No mention of the war is permitted within the city walls, and the king is merely a figurehead, as Long Fang secretly holds control of the government. And in my favorite moment of the episode, Ju Di is brought back into the room. But she's not Ju Di. She's another Ju Di. And we come to understand the lengths at which Long Fang will go to remain in total control. Rest in peace, Jet. This is the show at its strongest in my opinion. It does three things. One, it tackles a very serious issue. Manipulate those beneath him. He tricks the masses through censorship, and those who he can't trick are instead brainwashed. And he rules with a stone fist, utilizing his secret police, aka the Dai Li, to crush any troublesome individuals. 2.
This is our fight. Terrorists win. Planting. Bomb has been planted. We will dance on your graves. Move it! I'll throw in a flashbang! Terrorists win.
2. It's scary. Now, it's not the Puppet Master levels of scary, but it is certainly unnerving. Long Fang is not a joke. Seeing Jet get brainwashed
Come on, let's go! Flashbang!
is really creepy. I don't think Avatar should be a horror show, but what I like about these types of episodes is the level of gravitas allotted to their characters. It doesn't put a character like Long Fang as the punchline, which allows us to fully buy into his premise as an individual to be feared. And 3, it's not one episode. Everything I just described happens in one episode, but that's not the end of the story, it's just the beginning. This arc lasts another 4 episodes and
We must move. Throw in a flashbang. I am setting the bomb. Bomb has been planted. I am throwing a flashbang. Terrorists win. It is time now, my brothers. Flashbang! Terrorists win. Forward. I'm throwing a flashbang. Flashbang. Terrorists win.
and then ends on a cliffhanger with the reveal of Azula's.
Let's go, my brothers. Terrorists win. Let's show them who we are. Counter-terrorists win. Let's move out.
infiltration, because it warrants a longer runtime. And it's due to these qualities that I find myself
Go. Throwing flashbang.
myself disliking an episode like Season 1, Episode 6. For those unfamiliar, that episode is the introduction of Haru the Earth.
Move!
Earthbender. It takes place in an Earth Kingdom village.
Watch out. These boys have got a bit of an arsenal and they don't mind using it. Counter-terrorists win. Now we're getting stuck right into them. Come on, chop. Incendiary out. Deploying flashbang. Grenade out. Terrorists win. Nice. Gear up. We're going in. Incendiary out. Throwing flashbang. Nice one, boys.
village where the Fire Nation has arrested all earthbenders and bullies the remaining citizens into giving up their money under the fear of having their property burned down. To tap back into the idea of gravitas, I actually do think this episode starts off fairly well. The scene in which the Fire Nation soldiers threaten Haru's mom for taxes actually does seem serious. You understand why rules, because clearly, as demonstrated, these soldiers are no joke. Well, these ones aren't, but we'll get back to that in a second. Going forward, we see Haru and Katara get into a situation where Haru decides to earthbend to save an elderly man's life.
Hi.
Yep.
Yo. I'll go A.
I'll go A too.
Go, go, go.
I hear A.
Yeah, we lost him.
Deploying flashbang. Flashbang.
No. Never mind.
I dropped a kit on site.
Construction.
An action that would then result in his arrest and imprisonment. This is where I think more time being allotted would be useful. I'm not so cold-hearted as to
Go, people. Throwing flashbang.
If you're gonna take a spot, can you call it out, please? Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you. 72. Oh.
2B, right?
Right here.
I go outside.
Nice.
Bro, I haven't played CS in
Forever.
too long. So sorry about that.
It's whatever, man. You gotta want some now.
Forward pressure. Deploying flashbang. Flashbang.
Rotate one.
Flashbang.
Bomb. I can't see. I think to rotate, yeah, the rotate. Check for that guy.
To say I don't care at all about Haru's arrest, but I will say that it's pretty heavily carried by the scene of his mom crying. As it stands, I'd call these series of events passable, but could certainly be improved upon through an extra episode or two. Any amount of time developing Haru further than already given would have made this moment more meaningful, and thus leaving the viewer more invested into his well-being. As a counterpoint, one could make the argument that we do care about Katara, and as long as Katara cares about Haru, that's all we need. Which would perhaps give reason as to why I think the scene with Haru's mom crying is decent, because it's immediately followed up by Katara dropping her clay pot in surprise. That argument would hold up more if it weren't for the utter ridiculousness that is Katara's plan to get Haru out. It's simple, just get into a laughably unrealistic argument.
Get ready, folks. Throwing fire.
I just fucking
Flashbang. Molotov. Flashbang. Fire in the hole. Smoke. Throwing a grenade. Grenade out. Throwing smoke.
Hit him, rotating.
You gonna get behind him?
Hit right under.
Pushing it.
Fall down it.
Okay, I didn't mean to, I'm sorry. I just fucking like that.
Do you want to buy purple?
I got him,
Okay.
That's my phone, shit.
Push. Deploying flashbang. Molotov.
Okay.
Clear. Yeah, she's on spot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and probably some pushing mid.
Throwing flashbang. Deploying flashbang. Yeah.
Mid, smoke.
Bomb down.
Did I get a buy, bro? Never mind. I got a thing.
Sorry.
Grab your gear, let's go. Flashbang.
Yeah. I think they're A, boys.
Flashbang. Throwing flashbang.
Yeah, there's two pushing around.
Still lit. Ramp. 94.
Grenade. Fire.
Jesus.
You need.
Thanks.
Lock and load. Put up the flashbang. Flashbang. Molotov.
Some B. Or are you just shooting?
Molotov.
Two mid, one connector, glides at
Grenade
3.
out. Throwing flashbang. Throwing fire. Throwing a grenade. Laying down smoke.
Dang.
Be careful. Let's all make it home tonight. Flashbang.
Eh.
Flashbang. Fire in the hole. Incendiary out.
I got set. On site.
Throwing flashbang. Smoke. Throwing a grenade. Throwing flashbang. Move it. Move it. Deploying flashbang. Grenade out. Fire. Flashbang. Flashbang. Molotov. Throwing fire.
Pizza light at 50. B ramp. At least 2 there.
It's at 99.
Thanks. Again.
Let's move out.
No worries, man.
Throwing flashbang.
50 mid.
Grenade. Flashbang.
Probably on
with a person that is totally not your own brother, then have this large boulder sit on a conveniently placed vent where your avatar friend will airbend it into the sky, assuming he's not distracted for whatever reason, hope the Fire Nation soldiers don't recognize your water tribe garments, and then arrest you instead of the lemur monkey standing behind said vent. The problem is not that this plan is bad, though it is. The problem is that this plan is a joke. It plays off as almost parody with even in-show characters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here at least 3.
Characters such as Aang not giving it a care in the world. How am I supposed to take this situation at all serious when even the characters won't? Cut to the prison ship. We are introduced to a Fire Nation general or something. Now, I could just say think about Longfang and compare the two, and I think you would see the downfalls of execution in this character. But let's get even more specific. In this scene, 2 soldiers approach the boss to report a sighting of a flying buffalo. Or a bison. One of the two.
Which was it? A buffalo or a bison?
I'm not sure what the difference is, but that's not really the point, is it, sir?
So as you can see here, this scene doesn't really play out all.
Oh, gee.
Let's go, let's go.
Alright, I'll take it.
Throwing flashbang. Excellent.
Cool. Low B. Brandon.
All that seriously. The boss gets caught up in a rather minute detail of the report and is correctly called out for missing the point. This lends to the idea that he is incompetent. He then lashes out childishly and overthrows his soldier. Now, that in itself could be seen as intimidating if not for the soldier's comical scream as he plummets overboard. That's basically
Let's go. Smoke out. Throwing flashbang. Incendiary. Throwing flashbang.
Yo, what made the... Hey, everyone, 10 health.
basically one level above a Wilhelm. He then demands that the captain be woken up, only to be informed that that was the captain, again proving his incompetence. So how could this scene be improved? Well, let's take a look at an incredibly similar scene from the next season. Here we see Azula being informed that the tides will not allow for their ship to continue. Azula threatens the captain, reminding him the tides are not in charge, that she is.
And if I were to have you thrown overboard, would the tides think twice about smashing you against the rocky shore? Well then, maybe you should worry less about the tides who've already made up their
Grab your gear, let's go. Deploying decoy. Stay inside formation. Oh yeah!
Four.
Throwing smoke.
I'm all it up. Oh, there's
mind about killing you and worry more about me, who's still mulling it over.
First thing of note is the inclusion of music. The original scene played out silently, with only a single musical cue at the moment before the boss throws the soldier overboard. The music added to Azula's scene adds a consistent sense of unease, and while Azula's commands are almost as nonsensical as the original Fire Nation bosses were, in her situation it lends to the idea of her incredible position of power. With scene 1,
Like when I'm spectating.
Let's move! Shake a tail feather! Decoys out! Throwing flashbang.
B room. Sounds
Flashbang.
good. Could be wrong though. Don't take my word for it.
Come on, save.
Grenade.
Okay.
we conclude that the boss is an idiot, unaware of his surroundings and incapable of digesting proper information. In scene 2, Azula's roundabout way of threatening shows a certain level of intelligence, and that intelligence is never undermined by her scene partner, who instead perceives the threat for what it is and knowingly follows her command without addressing its lack of logic, as the alternative would surely be much worse.
Let's go. Throwing a decoy. Okay. Flashbang. Throwing fire. I'm throwing smoke.
Connector, one by the box, the big box. Connector.
CT.
Molotov. Throwing flashbang.
Still CT.
All in all, In Prison gives us a rushed premise with a lacking antagonist. I could go on to explain how the rest of the episode is as hurried as its first half, but that would mostly just be recycling earlier points.
Out. We are getting this done.
There's just one on it.
Whatever.
While an episode like The Great Divide is annoying in its own right, I find episodes like this to be much harder to get through simply due to knowing how much better the show can be. So much of Season 1 is dedicated to getting in and then getting out. Very few of the plot lines established result in long-term arcs until we find ourselves in the Northern Water Tribe, which coincidentally is also my favorite finale of the show. Avatar: The Last Airbender was always good, but the bridge into carefully written, long-term narratives made the show great. It's what solidified it as one of the best television shows to exist of all time. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe. I want to thank our patrons over at patreon.com/KatoYT with Zane Mafun. I thank our patrons over at patreon.com/KatoYT with Zane Mafun. I thank our patrons over at patreon.com/KatoYT with Zane Mafun. I thank our patrons over at patreon.com/KatoYT with Zane Mafun.
Flashbang. Throwing flashbang. Let's set this place on fire. Grenade!
Bro.
Someone behind us. Chris.
Green. Okay.
I'm laying down some smoke. Smoke.
He's running.
Setting the bomb. Bomb has been planted.
Lower. That's an AK. Construction.
72.
Play. Pass time.
Terrorists win.
Nice.
The bomb is sticking down. Let's go. Let's go.
I guess you're one mid. One on A.
B might be clear.
Boys, what do you
Throwing flashbang.
Timid.
Spawn at 87. Mid. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Grenade.
SB9 has 13 health. Because there's a guy there.
Throwing fire.
Multiple guys there. Too big.
Throwing smoke.
Mid con, who rotated eventually.
Planting. Bomb has been planted.
Fuck.
Introducing the all-new Donkey figure. They can be stacked on top of it. It's still pretty cool.
Go, go, go.
Thank you for the AK, Blue. You probably should take it to this point now. I'm not doing very well myself.
Good stuff.
Stand back.
What? Hit 190.
Smoke. Activating the bomb.
Better come to Donkey Castle. Better come to Donkey Castle. Better come to Donkey.
Or not. He bought naked, let's force at this point, bro.
Let's do this. I'm throwing a grenade.
Headshot. Sniper shots.
Grenade. Throwing smoke.
Behind.
Come on, let's go.
Purple, you're the one when I got mollied on. One mid.
It's 60 mid. I think there's
Alright.
two.
Yellow.
Yes!
Okay, just go B.
He just like shot me through the block.
Now let's go A.
Lay down some smoke.
Heaven.
I'm planting the bomb. Counter-terrorists win.
Fuck.
All right. Time to do this. Throwing a flashbang. Let's burn it to the ground. I'm lighting it up. I'm throwing smoke. Throwing smoke. Fire in the hole.
Was offered.
Fuck.
I got a P90 shield instead. Unless I'm mistaken. So.
I'm laying down some smoke. I'm setting the bomb.
No P90 mine instead. Flashing there.
Flashbang. Bomb has been planted.
Connector has an optal. Nice. Nice.
I don't know if anyone wanted the op or not. I just grabbed it.
Okay.
Who wants the op?
I'll take it.
Let's do this thing, come on.
Another one.
At least we want to miss a really easy
Where?
one there. Clear. A clear. And there, never mind, that's nice. Good job.
So better buy my Donkey toy. Link in the description. After Mario 64, Mario went into hiding, and for the next 6 years, everyone would have their shot at knocking him off the top of the mountain. There were 3D platformers coming at you from every direction. Bop, 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 boom. There was a game called Mr. Bones. Move over, Mario. Now, there are some good games and some really good games in here, and they all had their unique quirks. Gex had good jokes. Jack and Daxter had this huge seamless world.
Flashbang. Throwing flashbang.
There's 2 on site.
I have the moment I'm gonna die. This isn't cool. I'm running back. He has an UMP. I have like 30 health. So.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god, nice. Yeah.
Let's go.
All rush made 100.
Alright.
Is there someone behind too?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would.
That was cool. Fastest one I've played.
This is going like clockwork, man. Let's do this quick.
I'm not going mid again.
Grenade. Flashbang. Throwing flashbang. Let's set this place on fire.
We
Fire in the
have
hole.
A. I think, yeah, we have A boards. If you can wrap from mid, that'd be cool.
That's it.
I'm gonna go to CT spawn. I'm not going to CT spawn. It was a trade. I don't know what happened there.
Ratchet and Clank had all these different weapons. Sonic Adventure had Oscar caliber voice acting.
Watch out! You're gonna crash! Ah!
Yet in all those years of video games, nothing could touch the razor precision and expressiveness of Mario 64 until...
Super Mario Sunshine! Woohoo!
The triple jump is back, the somersault, and the dive, but now you can bounce out of a dive to go further, or you can shoot some water out in front of you, dive into it, and slide super fast, or you can do a spinneroonie blast. It's so buttery smooth and responsive that you can sink hours into this game just toying around with the movement. Then there's Flood, the talk